Everyone forgets that SEO is so human focused. It's not just trying to beat the algorithm. It's for humans and people on the other end.
And welcome to a new episode of Digital Coffee Marketing Brew. And I'm your host, Brett Deister. You can please subscribe to this podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps. Leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings. And let me know how I'm doing. But this week, we're going to be talking about B2B marketing, the unfun marketing of them all, which people are kind of roll their eyes and fall asleep to. But we're going to make this exciting because I have Steve with me, and he's a co-founder and CEO of Trio SEO. And he has been helping B2B and SaaS brands turn SEO content into compelling sales pipelines. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, and the first question, as all my guests, is: are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Coffee. It's pumping through my veins as much as I can get of it.
Do you have a specific coffee that you like, or you just whatever's in the coffee pot or Keurig is all I need?
My wife turned me on to good coffee. Her uncle owns Herkimer Coffee, if there's any other fans out there, but used to kind of trickle in the family, so I've now become a coffee snob, but just straight up black coffee is the way to go for me.
Yes, I do black coffee unless I have to go to Starbucks, and I can never do black coffee ever.
Yeah, I'm a cold brew at Starbucks.
And I gave a brief summary of your expertise, but can you give the listeners a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, I do SEO. I help people rank on Google and drive meaningful business through organic search, and now evolving into AI search, and do that through a variety of strategies, primarily in the B2B and SaaS space. Fortunately, I don't help with e-commerce SEO, and I don't help with local SEO. They're entirely different beasts, but I'm a big SEO nerd, big content nerd. Been doing this for almost a decade, and can ramble on about it, talk about a lot of fun stories over the years, and I love what I do.
Biggest lesson you've learned while growing brands to 1.4 million using SEO, and how did that experience shape Trio's SEO approach today?
I think you're referring to, I owned a portfolio of companies right out of college. That was my first business, and that was kind of my introduction into SEO back when you could get away with a lot more. And this was back when it was a little more lenient and kind of the Wild West era of SEO. It's just a cash grab. But that definitely has changed how I view strategies and quality nowadays. I mean, it's so important to build a brand and not build a website. And I think back in the day, people could spin up a blog on a no-name domain and throw some content on that and drive some visitors and drive some money wherever that needed to go. But nowadays, it's really important to focus on building a trustworthy brand and something that's backed by experience for the user and trustworthiness, and all of the things that contribute toward a sustainable brand and vision for the company.
And so what are some of the biggest challenges B2B businesses face with SEO today, and how do you help them overcome those challenges?
There's still a lot of competition out there, and I think that anybody who gets into SEO might say that they realize it's a long game and that it comes with delayed gratification and all that stuff. It's easy to say that, but at the end of the day, when you're waiting 6 months down the road for things to pop off and start compounding for your sales, it's a very hard game to play in, because it's not an overnight success like you can achieve with PPC. If you have a paid advertising strategy where you can just start dumping money into it and see this immediate return, in SEO, you really have to believe in it. You have to be patient, and 9 times out of 10, patience pays in SEO.
And with just your focus on the bottom of funnel, Google and ChatGPT optimized content, can you explain why this approach is effective and how it drives qualified leads?
Yeah, so we always start bottom of the funnel. That's something that my partners and I have kind of adopted from a lot of our own businesses, because I think that everyone will agree that all marketing is only meaningful if it drives meaningful results. And at the end of the day, it's a business. You got to make some money. So we always start very high intent, which means we start very bottom of the funnel. So topics that have a high probability of bringing in your ideal customer, and making sure that they're steps away from signing up for a free trial or sign up for your newsletter, things that would pretty much pull them into your ecosystem and allow you to nurture them into a sale. Or even in some cases, sign up for a demo or be a direct sale, whether that's going to be a service page or optimizing copy that's more sales focused. But every topic has a specific type of intent that's attached to it. And so our job is to figure out what topics make the most sense for your given strategy and what is the user intent behind that topic. And so based on a little bit of, science and art and psychology, we can take a look at the full landscape and create a roadmap that makes the most sense ROI wise and SEO wise.
So what does the typical 90-day SEO roadmap look like, and how do you determine high converting topics for content
It really
strategy?
just depends on what's achievable for the site. So every site, every client we work with is starting from a different position relative to their competitors. And so they might have existing content on their site that is under optimized. And so in some cases, we might just take a look at that and see, does it make sense for us to just go and spruce up some old content, bring it back to life? Other cases, we might have to design service pages or blogs from the get-go. So based on where we'll see with the client is kind of how we format the 90-day strategy from there on out. But it's usually always going to be bottom of the focus, bottom of the funnel, making sure that there's technical improvements, all of the low-hanging fruit, quick wins that make sense in order to build the foundation for your website. Just like a house, you wouldn't want to start putting on roofs or walls if your foundation was shot. So it makes sense to start there.
Yeah, and how do you actually basically overcome or beat the competitors with outranking them? Because I mean, that's how we want to do. We want to beat our competitors by outranking them. Does it consistent content? Like, how does that look like?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be consistency, making sure that, we can publish 5, 10 articles per month for the next 6 months. And you look back and you have a bunch of content, making sure that the content that you publish is always going to be very high quality and it aligns with the search intent. So if somebody's searching for something, are you answering that question? Is it clear? Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it backed by research? So making sure that you hit all those, threshold metrics right there. Other aspects are going to be site architecture and making sure that your site is fast and loads properly. It's not rocket science that when you land on someone's site, you want it to land, you want it to be clean and efficient. And I think that everyone agrees that's how it should be, status quo. So sometimes it's technical fixes, sometimes it's not, mostly just content, but just making sure that the user at the end of the day has the best experience possible. Everyone forgets that SEO is so human focused. It's not just trying to beat the algorithm. It's for humans and people on the other end.
And what SEO trends or opportunities do you see emerging for B2B and SaaS brands in the next year?
I think the biggest one could be personal branding and how figures and C-suite executives can really tap into that for small to mid-sized B2B growth. I think that going on podcasts is a great way to build your authority and to build your SEO on the back end for your site. I also think that there's a huge, huge opportunity with AI and getting found in things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and all these other great tools that are popping up. People forget that that's comes back to SEO and authority and making sure that your site is high quality and has content to match, queries as they come into play. So I think that there's a lot of upside to be captured, and it'll be fun to watch it, evolve and come to life.
So B2B is basically, or the new trends are going to be to basically humanize it in some way, usually because of the top executive.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we will lose touch with, big brands if there's not a fun person involved within the social media strategy. I look at brands like Duolingo. They're crushing social media, and they have the owl, which, rest in peace. But it was such a fun way to engage with the brand. And it doesn't have to be a fake or inanimate object, but because of how social media is nowadays, I think it's important to realize where are your users, how are they connected with you, and how can you tap into them, and it makes sense to kind of appeal to that up and coming generation.
And what is your approach towards optimizing content for both Google's algorithm and human readers, and how do you balance them both?
There's always going to be a fine line between hitting the core fundamentals for Google and making sure that it doesn't sound robotic. So, making sure that your headings include primary and secondary keywords and that you have FAQs and that you have internal linking and all of the kind of nuts and bolts that we now know today to be sound advice for SEOs. I think when it comes to the human element, being concise, being direct, being fun and engaging, not sounding like you're trying to use big words to make you sound smarter. I think getting your point across in a very conversational format is always going to be the best thing possible. I think that if you think about our conversation right now, everyone knows that we're talking about SEO, but it's not like we're saying SEO in every single sentence or every other word. So if you read content that seems stuffed or like people are trying to spruce it up to make it something that's not, it's kind of a red flag.
Would that be one of the ways you turn a boring blog into organic traffic titans? Because I mean, if you're trying to make something like, I think when you said trying to make big words, I think of like Joey from Friends when he tried to like make his stuff spruced up and use the thesaurus a little too much. Is it something like that where it's like, don't turn your blog too boring, or people are like, I don't even know what this word means?
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think you also have to realize that people are much smarter than I think we give them credit to when writing. We have a tendency to over-explain or to try and clarify things that don't need to be clarified, or use words because we haven't used them in the last paragraph or so. But conversationally, we can have an entire conversation around something and keep in mind what we're talking about and what the topic is on and what you've already read. And so it's no different than if you were trying to curate this conversation. I think that as long as you're kind of sticking to the script from an outline or what the actual structure of the blog should be, and you just make the content fun and engaging and direct, I think that the rest will fall into place.
And what's your framework for creating content that not only ranks but compels users to convert?
Yeah, so we use a variety of different things, making sure that call to actions are mixed in, but also organic. It's not like it's going to be a big in your face sales punch. Trying to ensure that there's always going to be a like TLDR summary section at the top. I always kind of laugh at how you can look up a recipe article and it will have 5,000 words around everything but the recipe. And so from that point, it's kind of good advice. If you're writing content, give people the information they came there for within the first paragraph or two, and then feel free to elaborate from there and expand on certain topics or areas of it that might need a further explanation. But there's no harm in giving people the 5 steps or the 5 pieces of the recipe within the first 30 seconds. Some will leave, sure, but remember why they came there and then loop them in and do the hook and bait them in and give them the rest. I think it's important to realize that everyone kind of thinks the same. They don't want to read through 5,000 words of trash. It's like no one's reading that. Come on.
Yes, if a blog post doesn't need to be 5,000 words, you probably shouldn't be writing 5,000 words.
If you can get away with 1,000 words, so be it.
And how do you measure success on an SEO strategy in terms of sales pipeline impact, and what KPIs do you prioritize?
Yeah, we always ask the client like how are they currently tracking success. You'd be surprised but how many people can't answer that question. And so we typically will come in there and say, okay, what matters most to you? Well, you obviously have something on the site that is a call to action. So we typically start there, whether that's going to be a contact form or a free demo or any type of other lead magnet mechanic. So we track those and try and make sure that we're pushing those toward the sales team. Other things can be newsletter signups, maybe that there's a really successful newsletter ecosystem within the brand. Others could be tools like a quiz or calculator or some sort of engageable asset. So we kind of see what makes the most sense from that side. And then we also track any of the core SEO stuff, which would be keyword rankings, clicks, impressions, time on page, organic usage, kind of all of the core fundamentals that are same on a site by site basis.
And how do you ensure clients see the value of SEO efforts over the long term?
Well, if we do our job right, then they get more business. So that's obviously the big kicker right there. But yeah, we update clients on a weekly basis and make sure that they're fully in the loop, what's going on between their content, any analytics that we're seeing, growth wise, wins. We tend to over communicate from that sense, and they don't have to reply to emails, but we do have weekly automated scheduled emails that go out every Wednesday morning. And so um, it's a great way for people to stay in the loop without feeling like they're not hearing from us, or whatever. That was a huge kind of point of feedback that we got as we were starting to work with clients, is that their previous agencies would go 30, 60, 90 days without contacting them, and they'd have no idea what they were paying for. And so we kind of planted our flag in the sand on the opposite side of that argument and try to do the opposite.
And what advice do you have for businesses that struggle to connect SEO performance directly with sales growth?
It's usually just a design fluke if you have traffic. I mean, if you don't have traffic, you can't sell. So that's kind of step number one. But if you have traffic and it's not converting, two things that come to mind would either be what type of traffic is it. So if you have blogs, but they're all top of funnel, of course, I don't think that those have a very high chance of converting. But if you do have all of the things, bottom of the funnel service pages and the correct blogs and all of this sort of stuff, and you have traffic and it's not converting, it's usually going to be a user experience or a conversion rate optimization issue. Maybe your site is wonky and you don't realize it, or maybe the buttons don't work as intended. So there's always going to be ways to improve a website once you have traffic, but getting traffic is usually the difficult part.
And then how do you figure that out? Do you use Google Analytics to figure out where people exit from? Do you use the website yourself and figure out like where your hiccups are? How do you figure out like where that's leading them to go away?
Yeah, we can look at page by page analytics, seeing what has traffic, what doesn't. We know where the CTAs are placed on sites, so we can take a look and see, what's being engaged with and what's actually moving the needle or not moving the needle from that perspective. Overall, though, we can kind of see just based on the data where people are going and is there a good way to capture that traffic. Maybe that means showing them a lead magnet, or maybe that means pointing them to something that they wouldn't have normally been exposed to. That's kind of based on the beauty of working with all these different brands, is that some have insane lead magnet assets that we can just tack onto the site. Others we don't, and that's where we get to kind of put back on our entrepreneurship hats and think about, okay, if we were coming to the site, what would the customer want? What value add can we offer to them? And how can we continue to nurture them beyond the initial visit so that they eventually turn into a customer?
And what do you believe makes B2B SEO fundamentally different from B2C SEO?
I think it's just the mindset of people who are searching for different keywords and different queries at the end of the day. I think that B2B is a little bit more strategy focused, where people have to do a little more research, or maybe have to see things in action. It's a little bit more delayed when it comes to trying to nurture a lead. A sales process, especially enterprise clients, can take months. But when they land, I mean, they're massive contracts compared to something like B2C, where it's in some cases, it could be, matter of minutes. They tap Apple Pay and that's it. I mean, think about how easy Amazon is to use, or TikTok Shop, or any of these things that are popping up. So there's just a whole different thought process psychology wise when it comes to how they engage with content and SEO. And I think that many things in the B2C SEO space, I think e-commerce is just crushing it nowadays. Like if you have an e-commerce shop and e-commerce SEO, like you're in a very, very good position to capture a lot of traffic in the future, because Google is continuously trying to figure out how to minimize the friction on e-commerce. So a good spot to be in for sure.
So would you say like the B2B side takes a lot longer with the SEO and like prepping it, because you having bigger contracts, so people actually have to like really research and invest and figure out what's the best route for them?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I think that, it's not always going to be this easy path to success where somebody reads a blog and immediately buys a product. Like that's a very rare thing. It's probably more B2C focused. In the B2B space, they might have to read the blog and then sign up for the newsletter and then read your newsletter for a week or two and then go back to the blog and then go back to the demo page and sign up for the demo and then, have the meeting and blah, 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 blah. But it could be on the back end, you'd have no idea, but it could be a month-long journey until they finally sign up for the service. That's a couple $1,000s a month from their point of view. It's not as easy as just kind of clicking buy now on a $25 t-shirt.
And what's the one piece of advice you wish every marketer knew about SEO and content strategy?
That it works. I think that many people forget that SEO is not this scam, black magic, witchcraft, and wizardry marketing strategy. It's a very, very viable path to long-term actually save a lot of money on your acquisition costs because, once you build the SEO system and once everything is in place, your CAC is always going to be much more efficient on a multi-year time horizon than something like ads or PPC. So if you're going to invest in it, think long-term, but that's the benefit of doing it and thinking long-term is that it's like investing in your retirement account. Nobody invests in their retirement account for the sake of trying to pull the money out within 3 years. So if you are thinking long-term about business and your brand, it makes sense to have a multi-year strategy that becomes more efficient as it grows.
Is it because it's always changing as well? Because I know fundamentally SEO, and maybe because SEO is just as old as email marketing, and everybody kind of hates on email marketing and says, oh, it's dead, and it's never dead. It's actually always seems to be always growing. Is it kind of like that where it's because SEO is not new? It's like you said, it was around since the Wild West of the internet. So is it because of that? Because it's kind of fallen out of favor and everybody's like, look at TikTok, look at social media, look at video and all that other stuff.
Evolving too. And I think that because of how long SEO takes to come to life, people feel like it's a scam because they invest, $2,000 to $5,000 a month for 4, 5, 6 months. And depending on the size of their site and depending on the industry, they might not see any results. And that's just the realism of it is that you have to, based on the industry and site, some sites might take 30, 60 days to see benefits and others might take 9 to 12 months. So I can understand that if you're antsy and you don't have a lot of cash flow coming in and you're spending that much money on something, then it takes that long to come to life. And if you sign up for the wrong person and it doesn't actually work at all and you just spend all that money, it's like, wow, I would feel scammed too. But, there's plenty of data points out there that prove that it works. And it's all about working with the right people who have the right vision and the right, resources to bring that strategy to life.
And people listening to this episode wondering, where can they find you online to learn more?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post daily. Always chatting with folks. If you ever want to, learn more about me or learn more about Trio SEO, Google my name, Steve Schneider with LinkedIn or Trio SEO. You'll find me one way or another.
And any final thoughts for the listeners?
I hope that you are thinking about your business as it relates to AI search because it's not going anywhere. And wouldn't it be nice to show up in ChatGPT organically?
Yeah, that would be great. Well, thank you, Stephen, for joining Digital Coffee Marketing Brew and sharing your knowledge on SEO.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. As always, please subscribe to this podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps. Leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings. Let me know how I am doing. And join me next week as I talk to another great thought leader in the PR marketing industry. All right, guys, stay safe. Get to understanding your SEO and maybe some SEO search and AI as well. And see you next week. Later.